Hi, I'm here with Adalbjorn Thorolfsson, President of the Project Management Association of Iceland, Managing Director and Senior Consultant at Projectus, and former Director of Project and Portfolio Management at Icelandbanki.
Okay. So first of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me on the channel. So to start with, so in general, some of the key roles and responsibilities of portfolio managers are ensuring that projects align with strategic goals of the company, that there's a process in place for prioritizing projects. You have an overview of resource allocation across the portfolio. You manage like the dependencies and risks between the projects, and also you communicate with stakeholders just on a general portfolio health. Going back to my work at Icelandbanki, first a little bit of history. I was managing a department of project managers. We were mainly focused on IT projects. But since we were like the only center of excellence in project management at the time, we were sort of expanded, and at the end we were managing all types of projects, especially if they were connected with IT. And then came along a very special project. So in Iceland, we have a centralized deposit and payment system that's run by like a separate company. And this system was like running a mainframe, getting like end of life. And they wanted to change the system, but of course it was really tightly integrated with most of the bank's systems and processes. So changing this was a huge undertaking, and it was a project of 3 years, and it consumed almost half of all project resources at the bank at the time. So before this project came along, there was no real overall project prioritization at the bank. But management, they wanted to know, okay, what other projects can we work on alongside this monster of a project? And they started this initiative, doing like ABC prioritization, A meaning, okay, these are the most important projects, and C, not so important. So they asked managers, okay, can you please rate your projects, ABC? And they had like 140 projects. And surprisingly, managers said, yeah, 130 projects were in the A category, 10 in the B, and none in the C. So basically, it wasn't useful at all. I had some previous experience with prioritization models, so I proposed, okay, guys, how about we do like a real prioritization using a model to help us? And that was accepted, and we did that, and we put also in place the governance processes. Needed to do that. So my role in this was like leading the development of this prioritization model and structuring the governance around that, and then running and maintaining the portfolio. However, we had a big challenge because we didn't have any PPM software at the time. So we just had Excel. And that was a bit tricky. It was cumbersome to maintain like the prioritization. It was hard to give any real overview. We didn't, of course, have any dashboards or reports for management. And of course, Excel wasn't connected to any other system, so we didn't have any like data upgrades or like on progress of projects or project cost, et cetera, et cetera. So we didn't really have any good tool for measuring project performance, getting information on resource usage, having like demonstrating dependencies between projects or showing just the overall project portfolio health. Yeah, so like I said, we didn't in the back we didn't have any tools, but I've been working as a consultant now for a few years, and I worked as a consultant for a different company where we had a PPM software, and that was a huge difference. A PPM software it can do a lot of things. It can help you with the prioritization of projects. You can have the prioritization models in the PPM system. You can use this software to help with the governance as well, to prepare decisions and to log decisions as well. And it supports strategic portfolio management because you can see quite fast which project are supporting which strategies, how well they support those strategies. and also what amount of resources you are allocating for each strategy. So is there like, are you walking the talk? Are you say you want to change something through a strategy, but are you really allocating the necessary resources to that? And of course, you also have like a real-time overview for the whole portfolio in the PPM system. You can see, okay, what projects are in trouble, what projects are behind schedule or running over cost, etc. But you can also have like some aggregated information that might be important, like what's the overall spending for the portfolio with respect to plans? Are we spending more than what we planned? Are we going to run into like financing issues for the portfolio or not, etc. So the PPM can really be like a single source of truth for like project status, cost and timelines, resource load, risks, and overall portfolio health. Yeah, so this is something that we struggled a little bit with at the bank. I mean, because we were mainly focusing on like strategic or business projects when we're doing these prioritizations. But of course, we had compliance projects all along, and we had like internal audit putting a lot of pressure on us working on those projects. So I mean, you might have like PCI DSS project or MIFID or just some in other initiatives that are important for internal audit. So we had to prioritize those projects well. And we couldn't have like internal audits saying, okay, you must work on all our projects. They were not of equal importance, basically. So we basically used their own method. Internal audit, they were using like on one hand, likelihood of something occurring, and on the other, the occurrence, sorry, the consequence of if that would occur. So likelihood times consequence, each one on a 5-point scale. So that would give you like a maximum of 25, 5 times 5. So, however, compliance projects are a bit more tricky because, at least for many compliance projects, you must do something before a certain date. So you have a really strict time frame, and you must really start a project before a certain date if you're gonna get there on time. So we actually added when we were evaluating compliance project, we added like a time factor. So if we started too late than what we deemed necessary to complete the project on time, then we had like this factor that drove up the score for the compliance project. So it increased the score for that project and made it more important. But then we had this issue that we had business project on one hand and compliance project on the other hand. So they were two different portfolios and people were getting confused. Should we work on compliance project or business projects? And they were just screaming, okay, we need one portfolio. So what we did was that we normalized the scores for these two portfolios and we merged them into one. And that actually worked amazingly well. I was a bit skeptical at first, but it worked out pretty well. Yeah, so financial services it can be a bit special. I mean, especially, I mean, you have a lot of like customer facing projects, and those can be really sensitive. I mean, let's say you're a bank, you have an online bank, you have an app, and I mean, hackers they love these things. I mean, they are really putting a lot of pressure on getting login information for customers or doing whatever they can to get their hands on financial information. So you have very high risks, cybersecurity risks for financial services that must be taken care of. But you also have things like customer experience because um, you have something, you have your online bank or your app, and you might be changing their experience. You might be changing the user interface, you might be changing how things work, you might be changing the processes, etc. And that can cause confusion as well for the customers, and you must really take good care of how you manage that. Uh, maybe more on the back end, you might be changing processes or making new integrations through some projects, meaning you change the flow of data, etc. And there you might be introducing some transactional risk. There might be risk of internal fraud. And of course, there is compliance risk. I mean, when you're changing things, are you really following laws and regulations? So as for all projects, it's always a good idea to do like your risk assessment, to follow up all those risks and then mitigating actions. And it's really good to have like a centralized risk register to speed up this process and to ensure that some risk might not be forgotten. So a PPM software tool can help you with that. Not only like demonstrate what risks do you have you logged as a part of your project, but overall on the portfolio level, what are risks are like the most common, and so what can we use is like a pattern here of the risk that we're having, and what can we do about that. So I mean, this is probably going to be a little bit different between companies, but you're typically going to have like some measurement of how well your project supports your company's strategy. There's probably going to be like some measure of financial benefit and maybe like lower operational risk. At least that is what we had at the bank. So we had like strategy, we put a weight of 50% on that, financial benefit 30%, and lower operational risk 20%. With respect to strategy, there were like 4 strategies beneath that. So it was being like number 1 in financial services in Iceland, increase organic revenue, simplify processes, and then there was like social responsibility. So we used a simple approach. We just said, okay, we have a project. How well does it support those strategies? Okay, and it supports maybe one strategy better than the other ones, and then we rated that on just on that strategy on a scale to 1 to 5. But in hindsight, we probably should have like rated it on all the strategies, because you might have a project that supports all strategies, and that might be more valuable than a project that only supports one. As for financial benefit, we at that time we chose net present value because we were aiming for like a longer project that needed more patience. But we got a lot of push for using return on investment instead. There are pros and cons, of course, because return on investment, that might mean you put a lot of focus on small projects that deliver a high benefit quite fast. But that might mean that you are forgetting or putting less focus on big projects that need more time but deliver more value dollar-wise at the end. So project management is typically tactical. So you're just focusing on specific objectives and deliverables of that project. One step above that is like program management. You're moving into more strategic. Here, you're aiming like to deliver benefits through like coordinated management of related projects. And then on top of that, you have portfolio management. And then you're really focused on aligning investments in projects and programs with the strategic objectives of the company, and trying to ensure that you have your work correctly prioritized and appropriately resourced to deliver like maximum value for the company. Okay, so I would say that basically we have 3 approaches. So we have Waterfall or Predictive, we have Agile, and then we have Hybrid, which is like a mix of those 2. And so if we talk about Predictive or Waterfall, the pros are typically you have clear expectations, you have like clear hierarchy and roles, you have documentation from the beginning, you have clear responsibility of who's delivering what, and you typically have good control over scope and scope management. On the downside, you need a lot of documentation. If you need to change something, that process can be a little bit cumbersome. But what is most important and most critiqued in the predictive approach is that in the execution phase, the client is mostly absent. So isn't a lot of communication between those who are working on the deliverables and the client. So typically the deliverables are only visible to the client at the end. And in this type of approach, you're tracking progress or time, you're tracking cost, scope, especially scope creep, quality through defect management and risks. So Agile can be really useful, especially in certain projects. The pros there, you have a more flexibility. You get deliverables more quickly and more like regularly, delivered like in sprints. You have a higher level of transparency. You have a lot of communication back and forth while you're executing the project, and often the team feels more responsible for the deliverables. But on the downside, Agile isn't all that great for all projects, and it can be difficult, like to predict the final delivery date or final cost for a specific set of deliverables. And it needs like training to be used appropriately, and it can even need like a change in mindset because for management or even employees, it's a different mindset than the predictive approach. With respect to tracking, you're tracking how fast are we burning down through our work, so burn down charts. You're measuring like team velocity, how fast are they producing things. You are measuring sprints. Are they successful? What is the success rate of sprints? And you're focusing more on measuring things like team satisfaction and customer satisfaction. Hybrid has been gaining, I think, a little bit more traction over the last year. So here you're trying to get the best of both worlds. And in my project, I personally use hybrid most of all. And because I find that management typically wants a predictive approach. They want to know, when do I get this? How much will it cost? Etc. And also the business side often is not comfortable with working with agile methods. While if you go on the IT side, they might want to work with Agile all the time. So my role as a project manager is to mix those two, to be the bridge between the Agile and the predictive world, so that everyone can really work with in the way that they choose. And yeah, so yeah, I've seen that a lot, that companies struggle like in having a balance between like strategic compliance and operational projects. So what some companies might do is that they dedicate a certain amount of resources to each type. So they have maybe like teams or money allocated for strategic, a certain amount for compliance, a certain amount for operational. And so a little bit of history here again. Before we had this project portfolio at the bank, in IT, for example, we saw that we had way too many projects running at the same time. I think we had as many projects as we had like staff. So the staff was spread really, really thin. So what we did was we started measuring, I mean, how much time are we spending on compliance and operational projects? And we found out a percentage that we thought was too high. I can't remember exactly, but it was like something like 35%, which meant that we could spend too little time on supporting the business with their strategic projects. So we put up a goal. We said, okay, we must lower the time needed for compliance and operational projects. And then we supported that goal with like continuous continuous improvement projects, and trying to eliminate waste. So we said, okay, we're spending way too much time on supporting this system. What is wrong? What is causing the errors? How can we make the operation more stable so that we have more time supporting the business? So that was one thing we did, and we managed to drive down the percentage way lower. I think the goal was somewhere around 20%. And then of course we just reduced the number of live projects, because if you have too many projects, your task switching all the time. So the focus was really on having fewer projects and deliver value quicker for those that remained. Later on, there were some like organizational changes. So they were more like, okay, now we have development teams and we have operational teams. So the development teams, they might be like dedicated on a few mission critical projects. They were like, we were getting people from all over the company business people, lawyers, etc. All the people needed to deliver that project, and we set a time frame of 16 weeks, and we said, okay, in 16 weeks you must deliver this new thing using like agile methods. So that was quite interesting. On the upside, this team, they had like 100% focus on, they were doing nothing else for those 16 weeks, and they managed to deliver quite a lot in that time frame. But on the downside, it was usually pretty heavy workload for those people, and especially at the end, and quality would start to suffer a bit. I mean, you're trying to deliver things and you don't have enough time, and typically what deteriorates is quality. Mm-hmm. And then you make a handover to an operational team. But the problem was that the operational team hadn't participated in the project. So they were getting something to run, and they weren't always happy with it because it still had defects, etc. And so these silos between development and operation, they can be problematic too. That's a good question. So if we focus on like tracking project goals, then tracking project goals for operational projects is more straightforward. Mm-hmm. The goals might be, okay, we're going to reduce cost, or we might want to increase the usage of a certain process, or we just have to replace an IT system with a new one. So typically you have a certain baseline, you can measure it fairly easily, and at the end of the project, you just repeat this measurement, and you can see, okay, did we attain our goals? This can be a lot tricky for strategic projects because they are often like transformative, they are focused on long-term benefits, and they might be aimed at like achieving, let's say, competitive advantage or some big change for the company. And let me give you two examples. Let's say the company wants to be like rated #1 in financial services in a certain domain, and this thing is mentioned once a year, and you're running like maybe, let's say, 10 projects to support this goal. And at the end of the year, you measure customer satisfaction, and you find it rose by 5%. But how do you know which project contributed to this goal? So was it one project or all, or maybe none? I mean, were people just maybe slightly happier this year? So it can be really, really tricky to measure. Other strategic initiative might be more easy to measure. Let's say a company wants to change the company culture. Let's say you have a power-driven culture, meaning that you have certain people that are really assertive, and others are defensive, or maybe they're simply disengaged. Mm-hmm. And management, they want a more like a team-oriented, customer-facing culture, and you start a program for that. Mm-hmm. This can be easy to measure because you have tools to measure like culture, and you can measure the culture before and during and after the program. Yeah, so as I've seen in my experience, this is pretty important, and I think it's always a good idea to integrate with an ERP system if you have one, especially financial management, because you want the cost information. So what's the real cost compared to the planned one, And you want to do that in the system instead of having like reports that are typically built on top of data warehouses or things like that. You might want to integrate with financial planning. I've seen, for example, both management and project managers struggling with having to do like financial planning for next year, put all the project in there, and then they have to do it again in the PPM system. That can create some confusion and some errors and data quality issues. So it might be a good idea to plan in the PPM system and then push the planning data to the financial planning system. And then I think it's always a good idea to integrate with time tracking systems, so you get the logged hours in the PPM system. That way you can measure how much work is being done, and this can help you track the progress of tasks and projects. And if you have like resource planning in the company, that might be interesting to have that as well, so you can get information on available staff and other needed resources for the project. But I mean, and also in the PPM systems, I mean, you have all this information. You have project definition, you have information about the project team, you have your KPIs, timelines, risk log, decision log. So an integrated PPM solution becomes like a single source of truth for all project information. And on a higher level, when you aggregate that information, it also becomes a single source of truth for the whole project portfolio and how well it supports the company's strategy.
Okay. Well, that was very insightful. Thank you very much, Adalbjorn.
Thank you as well.
Okay. And thank you for joining us.